Welcome everyone to Book Chat. My name is Laura Woodward-Cavers. I have Eileen Garvin with us here today. She has written a wonderful, very hopeful, lovely story called Music of Bees, or The Music of Bees. The Music of Bees, yes. And Eileen is speaking from Oregon. She is a beekeeper and a writer living in Hood River, Oregon. Her memoir, How to Be a Sister, was published in 2010. The Music of Bees is her debut novel. Sorry, it's like it's 8 o'clock for me in the morning, and it's 11 o'clock here. I'm sorry. Welcome, Eileen. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
So what was the inspiration of your story? How did you get inspired to write it?
There's not a short answer to that question, but I'll try to be efficient. And I'll say that my background is in, generally speaking, creative nonfiction. I was a newspaper reporter and freelance writer for many years before I wrote this novel. And as you mentioned, I wrote a memoir called How to Be a Sister. And in all those cases, they're similar in the sense that you're starting with an established sort of set of facts and deciding how to put it together, whether it's a business profile or a travel story or a personal essay. And The Music of Bees, being fiction, was really a completely different experience for me. I don't have an MFA, I didn't study creative writing, and the story really just came to me in a way that was just a delightful kind of writing to just follow the thread, is the way I describe it. And it happened one particular day. I was going to pick up a new nucleus of bees at a local farm, and lovely spring evening, and the orchards were all blooming. Hood River is very scenic. And as I was driving to the farm, I was passed by a young guy in a wheelchair with this tremendous mohawk. And so, this is something you notice, small town, country road, there's no bicycle lane there. So I noticed him, and I also noticed the hair, and I also noticed that he was very fit, which is something that I would remember later when I created Jake. And I remember thinking, oh, he must be a Paralympian. We have a lot of athletes in this town. And after he passed me, the first line for the story just popped into my mind. Jacob Stevenson had the tallest mohawk in the history of Hood River Valley High School. And sometimes that happened to me as a newspaper reporter, like I get an idea about something, but this felt a little more exciting. And I pulled over and I scribbled it down, and I went on to pick up the bees and went home. And then I just started with that. The next morning I got up and I just went with it. And every morning was this leap of faith, hoping that the story would be there and keep coming to me. And so that's the not so short answer, but it just sort of came from someplace else. And it was this really lovely adventure to just follow the thread as Alice and Jake and Harry revealed themselves.
It's wonderful how it did start. Here is the book for people who are curious. Yes, I thought it was amazing. Jake, one of the main characters in the book, is unfortunately he had an accident. He's a teenager, just at a time in his life when he's ready to go on and graduate from high school. He had a chance for a music scholarship at a college, and this accident kind of stopped that because he had to do a lot of rehab in order to just get back in his life, but he was in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And yet he had a spirit about him, so that he puts the mohawk on his head, and he stands out as a human being, in a way being rebellious, possibly because of the state that he's in, and you can feel that. But also that determining spirit is also another thing about him that you're introduced to and carries through in the story. And Jake is a great character, and then he meets Alice, or Allison,
It's Alice, yeah.
Alice, who has unfortunately had a rough time with losing her a late in life marriage to someone who is incredibly special and also different, quiet but powerful kind of a person. And she being meek, but had definitely learned to become a stronger person in the story. Is a great bringing together of these two kinds of characters that then are helping each other. Now, I thought it was amazing. You actually saw a person on the side of the road with a mohawk, and that was your inspiration.
Yeah,
Had
and
you,
I don't know who I don't know who he is. And this is a small enough town that I should meet this guy. So I've had this, that was in 2016, I should say. And I was at a book club this summer, out in that neighborhood. And one of the women there said, she said that there was a veteran rehab home right in the neighborhood where people would come if they were kind of rehabilitating from an accident. And so that made sense, that this might be that person. So that's my closest lead, but to date I have not met the real Jake.
well, interesting. You say that he had a mohawk, he was in a wheelchair, he was on the side of the road. That's one of the scenes very strongly depicted in the book that how many people, if Hood River, I don't know its population, someone would say, gee, that's so-and-so that I know that,
Right.
Sports a mohawk in a wheelchair and travels the roads. Then he may have already been, hey, there's a book about you, sort of.
Right.
And that, too bad he hasn't said, hey, it's me, to you.
Yes, and I sort of expected that. So I'm wondering if it no longer lives here, or if it's just the question of the pandemic that we haven't been out seeing each other in the normal ways, because it's a pretty small town. It's fewer than 8,000 in the town, and I think 19,000 in the county. So you recognize a lot of people, even if you don't know them, from the grocery store or for the post office, you kind of get a sense of people. So yes, and he would be very, noteworthy because of the hair and the chair. So I wonder one day.
Yeah, maybe someday.
Yeah.
Now, so you live in Hood River, Hood River is the place in the story too. And that's another wonderful thing about the story is that you are in this very tight community. It's not too big, but not too large. It has its issues. It has its growing problems, but it also has enough connective tissue that everyone kind of knows everybody. And that's a lovely part of the book. You also are a beekeeper. How long have you been a beekeeper?
I've been a beekeeper since 2014. I got my first hive in 2014 in the spring.
And what inspired you to become a beekeeper?
I had a friend who had a hive, and she had a different kind than I did. So the hive that I have, the hives that I have three, and usually two of them are occupied. That's another story. But I have a lovely dog who is very allergic, so I'm not gonna grow the bee yard at all. But my friend had what's called a top bar hive, which often has there's no frames in there, so the bees just kind of build their natural comb, and there's an observation window, and it's just beautiful you can sit there and watch them. And I was inspired by that, so I bought a Langstroth hive, which is what I write about in the book, and those are the most commonly used. It's a 19th century invention. An American beekeeper, Lorenzo Langstroth, invented this hive, and they have removable frames. So my friend's experience inspired me just because it was so fun to watch for bees. And also that time in my life, I had moved to Hood River with my husband and our lovely old dog that we got 2 months after we got married in 1998. And so she was in her last season. She was 16, and I just loved her so much. And she was really not able to walk anymore or hike anymore. And so I wanted a hobby that I could do while I was sort of hanging out with her, easing her on to the next phase. And so it was something I could, it was pretty time consuming to put the hive together and paint all the pieces and take the classes and get ready, and then sort of be in the yard, get the yard ready as well. So it served dual purposes, I guess you'd say.
So the book actually, is there a parallel between what's happening with Jake and Allison and then the bees, how the bees react to one another and just build a hive and how they work? I mean, were you trying to make a parallel between, I actually was seeing some parallels, but you're deeper into the knowledge of the beekeeping. Is
I
that?
wasn't, yeah, I didn't intentionally set out to do that, but I can certainly see that the parallels you could draw between them. What the reason I decided to use the bees originally, you know, Jake, as I mentioned, came first, and then Alice came next, and I wanted to give them something to do together, because I think it in a novel, but also in friendships, when you're doing an activity together or learning something together, it's a real opportunity for connection and also for something to talk about. And so I knew that I wanted to somehow have the beekeeping be central to the story. And then as it developed, I realized I wanted Jake to be able, is essentially, he's asking himself a question that we all ask ourselves at various points in our lives. How do I recover from this thing that's happened? How do I have the best life that I can have? And so I wanted to give him this. The beekeeping seemed like a thing that he could be exploring, that question, that broader question for himself with a specific activity. So it certainly served a functional purpose. And then, as you've pointed out, you can certainly draw some connections between the industry of the bees and how each bee has its very particular job, and that between the bees and the humans that they're existing alongside.
There's a lot in this book that you learn about bees. You're very good at weaving in the story, the importance of certain aspects that Jake is learning along the way, how to take care of bees, and Alice is teaching him. And then there is also the component, the environmental component, that is also part of the story. There's some, bad corporate people bringing pesticides to the region, and so that is part of the storyline. And we learn the fragility of these bees and the environment. And so that is also something, the fragility of being a human that all of a sudden has his legs taken away from him, and yet you have to try and do better, make better. Alice is working through her grief to find thing. Anyway, it's a fully, I'd say, a fully conceptualized great story of all the elements working together to really create just such a really, really lovely, lovely story. And so now I have to ask you, do you tend to your bees without a hood and all of that stuff like Jake? Jake is this mythical person who will go to the beehive, open it, and not be frightened or anything of the bees. Do you do that too?
I do not. No, I love that Jake does that. And I do know, and some people do, that the
Really?
beekeeping garb runs the gamut from the folks like Jake to people who, just fully gear up with the, boots, pants tucked into boots and gloves and hat and wheel and everything. And I'm somewhere in between those two. I'm not a relaxed person. I'm not. And so I must say I've become a calmer beekeeper over the years, specifically through studying them and knowing, because the problem with beekeeping is it's something that you can get into quite easily, whether or not you have any business doing it. And so learning how to be a thoughtful beekeeper has really made me calmer. But no, I wear a hat and a veil, and I wear long sleeves because I don't want to be nervous, because anytime you go into a hive, you want to be very clear. Okay, what am I doing? What's the goal for this particular visit? Am I Am I looking for pollen and brood and checking on, just the state of the hive to see if I need to add a box for them to go up? Or am I going in to say, put in a queen excluder or something like that? And then you have to think one step further. Okay, what else might I discover? What other equipment might I need? Because the more you plan in advance like this, the less you're going to be surprised. And then standing in the yard holding, a box of what has essentially 25,000 bees in it, and realizing you need to do something different because they're fragile and they don't, they get squished quite easily. So when I'm calm, there's that scene where Jake is trying to coach Harry, and I think that came from me wanting to just try to talk myself into just relax, be here. And in a way, it not only makes me a better beekeeper, but it makes me just a calmer human. It makes me a better writer because I'm able to observe more what's happening around me when I'm present.
I have a bee story that goes back to when I think I was 3 or 4 years old. My father's family had orchards. This is in upstate New York, and this is early 60s. And so we were visiting this uncle. Maybe he was a great uncle of my father's, but a very older man. And we were at his house, and he said, "Oh, I've got to go move the queen." That's what he said. "I got to go move the queen." And I was 3 or 4 years old. And so my dad said, "Oh, this is really interesting." So we went out, and I remember the uncle saying, "Stay right there." And there were the hives way in his orchard. So he was, I would say, about, 50 yards from us. Anyway, and so he had on, a hood, and it was a cool night, which is also important. They start to slow down, and they're not as aggressive or anything like that. And you were quick in your book to say they're only aggressive when they're threatened.
Yes.
And so they're not threatening all the time. And so when I was reading your book, I was like, oh yes, that uncle was walking very quietly, slowly to the hive. But then he did the most amazing thing. With a gloved hand, he put his hand right into the hive and the bees, and he was going very slowly. And and I said, what? I was 3 years old. I was terrified of bees. And I remember standing, being in the orchard, and it was kind of dusky and like it was a lovely, cool night. But then seeing him put his hands into the bee, I jumped behind my father's legs. I was just sitting there like, oh my gosh. And my dad is like, he's like, it's okay, it's okay. And my brother was standing there, and he goes, "Dad, the bees are all over his arm." He had gotten a hold of he could feel the queen.
Wow.
And I guess whatever his hives were, he couldn't open them and, have the different layers that you were describing of the Langstrom ones. He had to find her. And then he put his hand around her, brought his hand out, and the bees were all over his arm. And he walked across to the next hive. He walked across the whole orchard, just walking very, very big, but very quiet steps. I was so terrified. I stayed behind my father's legs the whole time as he walked. And then he put the queen into the next hive, and he just was quietly sort of pushing the bees off and slowly walked away. Wow. And I still am, I don't think it ever, as a child, I was always frightened of bees. This didn't cure it in any way. I now have much more respect, but, and I understand their behaviors more as a more thinking adult, but, seeing that as a kid, amazing.
It sounds amazing. It sounds really incredible. And the fact that he could locate her with just his hand, and I mean, you can find the queen by sight, and people do. I've never had to move mine like that, but it takes some doing because there are a lot of bees. There are quite a lot of bees in a hive. But the way that they followed like that, if you if you've ever seen a swarm, it really does look like in Winnie the Pooh, it looks like a big, ball of bees, and they're protecting the queen. And so they'll move that slowly. You can watch them cross a parking lot or a field. It's pretty amazing, because their whole goal there, and in the scene you just described, is just to stay together and protect the queen and don't do anything rash. They're not attacking because they don't want to hurt her or die themselves. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, it's nobody, no one became an orchardist after that. The orchard was sold. No one's tending bees in my family anymore, but that was just an amazing thing that I witnessed as a kid. Do you have any fun bee facts that you can share with us that are maybe not commonplace that we should know about? Just, given that our environment is changing, or is there any interesting bee facts?
Well, I will say, of course, there are the tidbits that I kind of sprinkle through the novel, but I don't know that this is overtly explained in the Music of Bees, but honeybees aren't native to North America. So in a sense, the fact that we love them and we appreciate all the work they do, because they make honey and they pollinate orchards, they were brought here in the 17th century by German orchardists, but they're originally from the Middle East and Africa. So in a sense, it's the concerns that we need to have for bees in terms of their environment and their hardiness and their ability to thrive. We should also be thinking about other native pollinators. I think Oregon has 500 of its own native bees. North America has, I think, 5,000. There's 20,000 species of bees in the world. So really, they're just kind of an entry point into our local pollinators, which is kind of fun. Once you start looking for honeybees, I would say, start looking for what else you see in your yard and in parks around you that aren't bees, but that are doing some pollinating. And then just for a couple of fun bee facts, I've written about this a little bit. Watching a hive brings you up close to sort of really this fascinating behaviors. Like one of the first things I saw them do this past season that I guess I should back up and say, I like to watch them. I like to go sit out at my hive and drink my coffee. But last year I was sitting out in my yard a lot more, and I noticed that bees are very hygienic, and they don't like to keep dead bodies around because they don't want to attract predators like skunks and other and rats or raccoons or whatever, or even like blue jays and things that might come try and get into and eat the members of the hive. So a bee will live an average of 6 weeks, and then she just falls down in the hive. If she's working in the hive, she just falls on the factory floor, as they say, and then one of the sister bees will take her away, and this is referred to as, they're called undertaker bees, and it's really amazing to watch that. They weigh the same, so this little bee is carrying its own dead weight and just flying really slowly, taking it away and dropping it off into the yard where it's far enough away to not be a hazard.
Wow.
Similarly, I'll give you one other example that was fascinating. Last summer I saw, it's called hygienic behavior. The bees are plagued by varroa mites, which is something I didn't get into in the novel, but it's a particular parasite that gets into the bee at the larval stage, and it's thought to be a major reason that hives don't survive. And the honeybees have evolved to sense that the parasites are in the larva, and they kick them out of the hive. So after all this work that they've done to feed and tend to the eggs and watch them grow, at a certain point, if they recognize that there's a mite on there, they pull it out and kick it out of the hive. And I saw that happening, and it just blew my mind. And I have a beekeeping mentor, and I took pictures, and I put it under a microscope, and you could actually see the little mite on there. So they're just
Wow.
very, they're on it. They're on top of it.
That's incredible. That
Yeah.
is so incredible. Well, this is a wonderful story. I highly recommend it if people are wanting just to have a good, quiet read and enjoy the story, the characters, the environment. It's a lovely, lovely story. And Eileen, thank you so much for sharing this, little insights about it with us today at the book chat.
Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for reading it. And thanks to everybody for showing up to hear me talk about it. I appreciate it.
So we're now going to, because this is the book chat, we're going to now talk about book recommendations. And Eileen, you have brought 3 books.
Yes,
Is that
I have
right?
3 books.
Okay.
So I'm reading for my own book club, Crazy Brave by Joy Harjo. She's our National Poet Laureate and a member of the Muskogee Creek Nation. I've always loved her poetry, and this is her first memoir. She has another out right now, but my book club's reading this one. She's also she's a poet, a memoirist, and also a jazz musician. She's a pretty amazing, inspiring person. I also always love a big fat novel and I do mean fat, to sink into. And I recently just finished this one by Miyazaki, which has a library in its center, the Book of Form and Emptiness. I just really loved just digging into that. I didn't do anything else one weekend and just read that book. And it's a great story about a teenage boy and his mother sort of reeling in the aftermath of his father's accidental and unnecessary death. It's a great story. And lastly, I'm getting into the Christmas spirit. Last night I put up my tree and I read A Christmas Carol by Dickens. I have 4 siblings, and all of us, my parents are big readers and have always loved Dickens. And of course, we're all familiar with A Christmas Carol from the many, many incarnations of the film. And it was so fun to sit down and read this because it's short, but it really got me in the Christmas spirit. And his prose is just so funny. He says Ebenezer Scrooge is solitary as an oyster. It's just the best. And I love the message of the book, the chance that I think we all love the idea of like looking back on our younger life and what we would do differently, and to have the chance to redeem ourselves. So it was sweet, and it made me think of, just got me in the holiday spirit.
Yeah. I actually do have all these like Christmas books that I have gotten over the years, and I have a basket of them, and every year I bring them down for a year and just sort of, it's from the New York Times best, Christmas stories collection to, just 'Twas the Night Before Christmas, or, just any kind of a story about Christmas. I have a huge basket.
That's a great idea.
Yeah, it's fun. And the family, they pick through it and, just find books just to read. Okay, so the suggestions that I have, some of you may have been at the Holiday Book Buzz last night. I was worked with Elm Street Books last night, talking about just some great suggestions for some of the people on your Christmas list. And so we had a fun time doing that. One of them that I suggested late in the game, because I just started it, but oh my gosh, I know a lot of people are enjoying it, The Paper Palace. I'm just going to read to you what some of just the highlights of what other people have said about this book, because I've not yet finished it, but I can't wait to get home today and read it. It's one of those kinds of books, and it's shocking. It's kind of taboo-y. It's kind of like a taboo book. If you want to like get into real dysfunctional family with everybody that has been, married 3 or 4 times, and the children are off with, the nanny for years, and, all this sort of just kind of family carnage. It has a real taboo feel, but so well written, and, with some central characters that are very, very dear to just lovely kind of characters. But anyway, here's what some people have said. Filled with secrets, love, lies, and a summer beach house. What more could you ask? literally, the paper palace is a building that a long ago relative of this family that is now inhabiting it literally built it out of paper. It is just corrugated board and all these different kinds of books and all the just paper. That's all it's made of. And it's a summer home. Okay, a deeply emotional love story, the unraveling of secrets, lies, and a very, very complex love triangle. Nail biting, a magnificent page turner, an irresistible placement of a complicated family in a bewitching place. A story of summer, secrets, love, and lies. In the course of a singular day on Cape Cod, one woman must make a life-changing decision that has been brewing for decades. So, and it's all of those kinds of words. It's a real mind-bending kind of and not dystopian. It's written like a a fictional novel, but just a really very dysfunctional, wanting to function well family. All right, the next one, you probably have heard of this one, Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. Anthony Doerr wrote All the Light We Cannot See, and he was a National Book Award winner, and he just a really, really lovely person to even have at your library. He did come to the library to talk about All the Light We Cannot See. Well, this is his latest book. I don't have copies of it. It's always out. Same with the Paper Palace, always out. So I don't have books to show you. This is a thick book. I will say it took me until about page 70 to really get into the gallop, and I will say a gallop of the storyline of this book. Anthony Doerr has written something that is, it has many different storylines, and you're introduced to them in those first 70 pages, and he revisits as you get to know the characters a little bit more. So what has been said about it is that it is set in Constantinople in the 15th century. That's one storyline. Another storyline is in a small town in the present day Idaho, and it's in a library in Idaho. And it's also in the future on an interstellar ship decades from now. And how it starts out is just a library is under siege by a gunman. And so all of a sudden there is the danger of our archives. And he's thinking of burning the building down. Constantinople, you're set off in history, this historical fiction about people who are finding old scrolls, and the people who are very poor and need money are sent off by for very small amounts of money to go into deep dark caverns, to go across raging oceans to islands where some of these scrolls are, and to bring them back to these scholars who pay for them and are trying to preserve them, these treatises from long ago. And so there's that bit of a storyline going on. Again, saving archived scrolls. And then into the future, you're into an interstellar ship that is trying to go forward, but must know everything of its past in order to go forward. So you see, everything is sort of revolves around a library's importance of knowledge, of having a place to go for just reflection about human beings, where we are today. So what they go on to say is this third novel, I've not finished it yet. I'm reading these two books simultaneously, which is a crazy thing to do, but I also like it too. One's in the morning and one's at night. Anyway, this third novel is a triumph of imagination and compassion. It's a soaring story about children on the cusp of adulthood in worlds in peril who find resilience, hope, and a book. It's a magnificent tapestry of times and places that reflects our vast interconnectedness with other species, with each other, and with those who lived before us, and with those who will be here after we're gone. So it's a really big, big undertaking of a book that Anthony Doerr is doing with this book. It's very thick. I think it's about 700 pages. So for those who don't want to get into too big a book, this is not yours. But you know what? If you really want to have a book experience, I think Cloud Cuckoo Land, I'm that's the other book that now that I'm past the 70 pages and I'm getting it, I'm getting what he's trying to do. I'm really moving forward on that one. So I highly recommend that. And then the last thing I'll just say is, here's the holiday book buzz list that I have. We've made these cards up for people to take at the library. On one side is the Elm Street and the library met last night and talked about adult books that we think are good for under the Christmas tree and gift giving. And on the other side, we have books for children and families and teens. They met the week before with Elm Street and did their own kind of a book buzz. So all of the suggestions are on there. I know Elm Street has a set of these. We have a set of them, and I will put them into the email that I send out to you all later on today or early tomorrow, that will talk about the music of bees, as well as all of Eileen's book recommendations and my recommendations. So there's a lot coming to you. Keep an eye out on your email for these other book suggestions for you. I thank you all so much for attending. Eileen, thank you so much. That was a wonderful, wonderful presentation about music of bees. And we have Christina Espinoza. Next time, this was a lovely conversation. Thank you, Christina, for coming. There's one last question I'm going to have of Eileen. The main character, Jake, has an ability to hear the queen. She makes a certain noise and he can hear it, whereas other people cannot. Is that true, that a queen bee will make a particular sound?
It is true. And I found that little piece of trivia doing some research when I was revising the book. And I'm musical. And I have a sister with perfect pitch. The sister that I wrote How to Be a Sister About, Margaret, she has very keen hearing, which can lead to some comic situations. When she hears off pitch, it's very upsetting to her. So like at church, when we were kids, if someone would be singing off key, she might yell. We're very musical in our family, and I came across this just in a little sidebar in a book I was reading, and I thought, wow, that's really interesting, and I just did a little research on it, and it has been shown, scientists are studying this, and the queen makes this G sharp or A flat. What I didn't mention, which is a little more bloodthirsty, is that often the queens make this sound, which they call quacking or tooting, when several queens have been developing in their cells, because one of them needs to become the new queen. Whoever hatches first starts making this sound, and the others respond. And whoever hatches first is trying to kill the other ones before they hatch, because she's going to be the queen bee. So that's often when you will hear the sound. But yeah, I loved that idea, and I love just one of the best tips my mentor gave to me about approaching the hive is, before you do anything, how does it sound? And you really can discern if there's a disturbance in the hive. You can hear a difference in tone, and I certainly don't have the pitch to like figure out what key that is, but when things are good, there's this calm hum. When things are off, when there's been, a robbing or something like that, you hear this agitation. So it's just another layer, the sound that I had fun playing with.
Well, great. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I wish everyone a very, very happy holiday. Eileen, again, thank you. That was really great, great information about the bees. And then please, everyone, read her book. It's just so pleasant to sit down and read it. It's great. All right, everyone. Thank you so much. I'm going to say my goodbyes. Have a nice holiday season and new year. I will see you next month, and we will have Christina from the is that her someone from the YMCA coming to talk about all these books that are out there to get you fit, eat healthy. You know, what are good books, what are bad books. You know, she's going to get us all into the right mode of keeping ourselves healthy. So that's what's next month. Good night. I mean, good night. Oh my gosh. Goodbye.